and cultures and places and people.
Yep.
That was, I think, the most meaningful for me. How about you?
A memory, there was an energy, but a moment that I remember being stunned by was when he was asked about death, and he talked about wanting to make sure he kept his eyes open for the moment, that he wanted to make sure he lived it fully. And I just was so stunned by that mindset. And there were just so many like that, but that's one that comes to mind when you ask, fully living every moment.
All right. I love the discussion leading up to this. But welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm Todd Youngblood. I'm going to be sharing today. I don't have too many slides really. I think there's more depth than breadth. But yeah, this is going to be my discussion on, as a part of Local DAO Summer, looking at the REA kind of accounting methodology and exploring how that is kind of this upgrade or what I might call an evolution of specifically information and communications technology within an organization. I'm going to break down some like technical abstractions and hopefully make what could otherwise be a fairly like inaccessible, abstract discussion, hopefully a little bit more tangible. And if anybody has questions in the interim, please raise your hand. I don't mind actually being ignored or interrupted, excuse me. Prefer not to be ignored, but yeah, I'd love a free flow kind of conversation. So if you have any questions as they emerge, pop them in chat and we can kick off together. But this is a little bit of my background. I'm based in the Western United States in Denver metro area with my dog and my wife. I'm going to be a dad in the next 90 days. So I'm kind of preparing my life for that transition, welcoming a daughter into the world. My kind of educational and academic background is specifically in information technology. I have an undergraduate degree, a Bachelor of Science in information technology, specifically looking at cybersecurity, and then a Master's of Business Administration in Information Technology Management, where I was exploring distributed technologies and peer-to-peer finance. So 10 years ago, I was working for a large consumer bank here in the United States. And over the past 10 years, my career has led me into distributed systems. And I would say kind of from a sociology, social organization perspective, how we organize ourselves with a specific look at kind of the legal structures of how we organize. I've been a member of IEEE for 12 years. IEEE, for those of you who don't know, is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. I feel kind of camaraderie around this idea of collectively advancing technology for humanity. That is the IEEE commitment, advancing technology for humanity. And I think my little personal bit onto that is Earth as well, balancing kind of humanity with our place in Earth and care for Earth as a living system. So my leading interest that I think got me into this idea of decentralized finance, peer-to-peer economics, DAOs, and the technology kind of under that umbrella. I'll start with the bottom, kind of from a bottom-up perspective. So like the foundations, my kind of foundations and how I relate to my practice in information and communications technology is how digital economies are built. So thinking of like an economy as a shared house and how we collectively organize and gather and make commitments to each other. What is the role of digital technologies and how we organize our economy? And so kind of stepping up from foundations into systems, what is the role of systems and digital technologies in the way our economy is organized? So there are many forms of organization, from shareholder corporations on what I would say maybe one side, and cooperatives and what could be considered a nonprofit on another side. I think there's a spectrum of biodiversity, if you will, in our economy, and I think I'm really interested in understanding kind of the balance and ecosystem of the economy and how we might be able to create a more nurturing economy that maybe is less combative, less competitive, less predatory. So building on top of the systems, I think the third kind of interest that I hold is the evolution of our system. So as we quote unquote innovate or maybe listen to our customers, our clients, the users or guests of the technology, how do we incorporate new contexts and learning to adapt and evolve the technology that we're building in a way that better kind of serves the needs of those stakeholders or of those people ultimately. For me, the focus here is specifically in the evolution of accounting and finance. The accounting mechanisms, the agreement structures that we hold that really constitute an organization, and at the ecosystemic level, the economy, recognizing an economy of multiple organizations. So that's kind of this progression and the three different kind of leading interests and three different frames or perspectives that I'm bringing to today's discussion. Any questions so far? All right, let's get into it. Basic disclosures and some statements. I'm not a lawyer. None of this is legal advice. I'm not a financial advisor. None of this is financial advice. And I'm really interested over a decade in digital technologies and cryptocurrency, digital assets, whatever you want to call it. So I hold economic interest in these. So I am biased. I want to see DAOs, I want to see blockchain all thrive and serve kind of their highest form in service to humanity and our living planet. So yeah, I'm pro crypto and pro financial innovation. So I'm really just going to go through 2 slides here. These are a bit dense, but I want to break it down and look at forms of organizing and framing the books of a company or books of an organization as a collective intelligence mechanism. We're going to get into REA and what specific role resources, events, and agents play in kind of this evolved version of an organization. But to understand where we're going, I would really like to look at kind of where we are and the state and the history of the practice of accounting and finance and how they relate to the formation and the operation of an organization. So the current standard for this collective intelligence mechanism is the books and specifically our financial statements. If you don't have kind of a starting understanding of accounting and finance in an organization, one of the first things you'll learn about is the financial statements. So financial statements are disclosures. They're periodic statements, and they consist of the income statement, which tells you about the organization, specifically the profit and the loss of an organization, how much money that organization has made, and how much it's spent on expenses to make that money. You have the balance sheet, which looks at the assets of an organization, as well as the equity of an organization, or what we could call ownership or control of an organization. That's typically represented in equity. And then the third kind of key element of a balance sheet is the liabilities, what it owes. So here I'm exploring kind of the right-hand side of this visualization. And then the third and final kind of element of the financial statements is the statement of cash flows. So this kind of recognizes an organization as a dynamic, potentially living entity, but specifically looks at one dimension of value flow through an organization, which is cash, financial value. So these financial statements, as kind of indicated in the name, are an indicator and a measure of financial value through an organization. It's unfortunately, in this kind of traditional collective intelligence mechanism, it's a unidimensional perspective into the state of an organization. So kind of my technical academic kind of qualifier on this slide is that under the current paradigm, under the current mechanisms, organizations are a unidimensional state machine. We're really just looking at the flow of financial value through an organization, and that rolls up all the way to the top, and how DAOs as kind of emerging legal entities would be expected to potentially file SEC reports. SEC reports are kind of this consolidation of the state machine. They mark specific activities or events of an organization. Say when you go public, you file with the SEC. But I'm really framing an organization here from the perspective of its primary kind of information and data elements, which are the financial statements and different ways of perceiving financial statements over time. So looking at the history and kind of where this pattern emerged from, accounting is one of the oldest practices in civilization. I mean, if you look at where language emerged from, we were pressing basically letters into clay tablets, and that was kind of a form of economic organizing. So double entry bookkeeping emerged in the 15th century, and that remains kind of this active practice that we have, where double entry is the recording of kind of a balance between credits, which are typically expressed as what I am owed, and debits, which is typically, not always, expressed as what I owe, kind of as this exchange or transaction. And so really emphasizing the books, these financial statements, as this collective intelligence mechanism or collective intelligence tool, they actively facilitate decision making within an organization by the board, by executives, by the majority shareholders. They also indicate that we have the stock market. They're indicators of performance. A share value isn't a great signal of value creation, but they're leveraged heavily for evaluating the performance of any organization, and a share has a direct relationship to the financial statements under the balance sheet and who owns the equity of an organization. So they're also used as a resource allocation mechanism, understanding where a company, specifically within a statement of cash flows, where that organization might want to invest, where that organization might want to finance investment, and it determines how an organization kind of builds itself over time as it allocates those resources. And then additionally, it's used as a communication tool. So it's used as a communication tool between the board and the executives to communicate with the general public in the context of a public company. Analysts, there's billions of dollars of industry and markets in financial analysis in multiple practices. There's financial analysis looking at the technical indicators of a stock. And then there's also fundamental analysis, which is actually looking at the product or service of the organization in the context of its industry, in the context of its team, in the context of its research. Fundamental analysis is more looking at the core of a business versus technical analysis, which is looking at an indicator that's adjacent to the financial statements, which is a share price. And then finally, the kind of as a collective intelligence tool, the financial statements look at that goal alignment. So ultimately, depending on who you talk to, the ultimate goal of a business is to create value for shareholders. And unfortunately, sometimes in a competitive economy, that value flow comes into conflict with the core good or service of that organization. Almost the reason that organization was formed in the first place, the good or the service it offered has oftentimes this contentious relationship with the shareholders of that organization. There's this pull kind of back and forth between creating value for shareholders and then creating value for customers. And it comes down to the extraction or the investment in that product or service. So this is the current this is the framing of the current paradigm as I see it, as an MBA who has studied kind of how we organize our businesses or potentially our nonprofits, but specifically organized around financial statements as this, if you will, a state machine or a value creation mechanism or structure. So let's move in from kind of this unidimensional space into the multidimensional space, which I think is really where the magic of REA lies. Looks like we have a question.
Just like hopefully a really quick aside. I've been thinking a lot about this this concept of Uberization, which basically from what I understand it's like, okay, an organization can develop network effects and run at a loss for a great deal of time, with the assumption that once you've sort of once people aren't using taxis anymore, now we can fix the prices to be much more optimized for actual gains. I wonder if you have any like I'm interested in that from within this framework. Does it correspond? Is there like nothing exotic going on there, or is it a very different approach to this sort of traditional model? I just wonder if you have to say about that.
Yeah. So speaking about the Uberization, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess what I'm hearing in your question is this idea that there's this rush to market to offer a new service. In this case, it's disrupting the existing transportation kind of taxi industry. There at the beginning, there was a lot of investor subsidies that were invested in expanding the product to capture the market, and that kind of speaking to what I was speaking before, it's this tension between the product or the service and then the value of the investor. But now what we're seeing even as a customer of Uber, I think what I'm personally seeing is that now that they've had market penetration, potentially market capture, what was their competitive value proposition, which was lower cost rides that are more easily accessible, are now relatively higher cost relative to a taxi, and the supply of drivers, which they have a hard time maintaining, is that mechanism that makes it accessible. So what I would call is maybe this like service decay, or if you understand the perspective of like Cory Doctorow and his process of enshittification, there's this like value decomposition that's happening within Uber in this case, and it's I think it's representative of this tension between the value creation for shareholders on one side of the product or service and the value creation for customers on the other side of the product or service. Did that kind of clarify or answer your question?
Yeah, I think maybe the question is, from the perspective of this framework, is that sort of that process, that enshittification, is it reflected in the double entry bookkeeping? Is it reflected in the books, or is it something that is obvious to any any realistic interacting with the company, but not something that's reflected in, the books aren't multidimensional enough to reflect that identification.
I wouldn't say it's reflective of. I would say it's a consequence of. I would, and what I'll be exploring kind of the next slide or blueprint is this. It's the growth at all cost paradigm, and what I mean is like the actual social costs aren't being taken into account because there's only one dimension of value represented by the books. Everything is as I kind of say down here, it's mostly a quantitative analysis of like monetary flows and not a holistic qualitative analysis of how are we creating value and who are we creating value for. I think it's a result of being over dependent on value flow and value return to shareholders versus value flow and value return to users or passengers and drivers of the Uber service. Cool. All right. See the thumbs up. Thanks for the question. I appreciate this. All right. So moving into the next slide, we're looking at kind of REA books as again a collective intelligence perspective. So this is an upgrade. If the traditional books that we're looking specifically at the financial statements and the flow of financial value, this is a multidimensional organizational state that's being presented through this updated form of books. Maybe version 2 is what we can call it. Traditional is version 1. This kind of evolved version is version 2. So the REA accounting model emerged in the 1980s from a gentleman named William McCarthy. It kind of starts to explore this form of organizing from multiple perspectives, and specifically from the 3 dimensions of resources, events, and agents. I'm not super keen on that language. I think resources and events are fine, but I think actually this works really well in the context of like economic agents, but I would rather name it like actors or maybe create some level of agency for an individual in this framework. But kind of going through this, I started the last one with the financial statements. So let's look at how this potentially modifies the financial statements while still proposing to solve the same question that each one of these financial statements addressed. So instead of an income sheet, you have your gains. So where that was previously limited to kind of inflows and outflows of financial value, we could represent this and evolve it to include other forms of gains or additions into the organization. So that would be, I think, an inclusion of what you could call the org chart on the income statement. So we're adding to our team capacity. We're adding different people with their own unique kind of individual skills and talents that they're bringing to the company. We're organizing around different events. We're maybe we're thinking about going public, but there are certain requirements that we have to establish before that process happens. So maybe a named event in kind of this modified financial statement could be how we organize to meet those requirements. And then the agent model is really looking at the people. I think the resources I might have misspoke to as including people, but that's really the inventory, the assets maybe of the organization. And then under balances, you can start to explore how those are changing over time. Where in a balance sheet within a traditional corporation, you could have the current state of just the cash accounts. Here you get from one dimensional into multiple dimensions. You could get the current state of the resources, the current state of events in their context, the current state of the agents or the people that constitute your organization. And then moving into the third kind of document of the financial statements, you would get insight into the flows. So kind of a view over time and changes over time. So again, you get that level of insight into these three different distinct categories of value. And so moving from version 1, the traditional kind of unidimensional perspective, into the version 2, the multidimensional perspective, the model is enhanced because you balance what is largely a practice of numbering and accounting as a quantitative process. And I think the REA model enhances that process by balancing it with more qualitative possibilities for data curation and information relay. So going through kind of some of the specific benefits of this evolved and enhanced REA model, you really get a more high fidelity scope into the organization and its structure, away from that kind of financial value as the single dimension and into the three dimensions. You create relational thinking. So instead of it kind of being an absolute like win or lose game, it's more balanced, and there's relationships. Maybe you lose agents within your organization. Maybe you lose team capacity, but you actually gain something in return. It's not a binary outcome where when you're looking at one dimension, most decisions are binary. I think REA, all decisions are made in relationship to the whole. Third kind of benefit is you get enhanced data, and I think that data integration could be used to inform sense making or decision making in other parts of the organization. I think a system that would perform REA in an organization could benefit from more real-time information sharing. I come from very large corporations as employee of a consumer bank. I think the larger you scale, the less information passes between people, between teams, and specifically in certain dynamics, you can start to create silos where what is ideally a symbiotic and cooperative relationship with your teammates and your organization, you get competition and data siloing and a lack of knowledge sharing and kind of information sharing between teams and within the organization, and that has its own knock-on effects. So I think with this understanding that you'd have to have technology and systems in place to adopt this REA model, that REA model could serve different teams and keep data silos from emerging and kind of creating this conflict and teams. I think there's enhanced flexibility and scalability in the model, where primarily value flows are the common denominator is financial value, that one dimension. You get more nested relationships. You still have money; it's still represented in the resource model, but that money is kind of deprioritized to balance the other forms. So I think that leads to flexibility and scalability. You get a higher level of sense making, and I think that creates in itself kind of this potentially REA could create a common language and a common frame of reference for everybody to be able to relate to the work at hand within that organization. You get enhanced analysis. Obviously, the REA model is more complex. It would be more management and administration of an accounting mechanism, but the outputs and the insights of this kind of frame as a collective intelligence tool, I think is just, I think it's a bit big. It's not very humble to say, but I think it's a paradigm shift that could happen when you change the way you think about how you're structuring your organization and the fundamental value that your organization is organizing around. I think you get to change the nature of the organization in the whole of the economy. And then, so the final is like cross-functional alignment. I think that could be cross-functional within the team through data sharing. It could also be cross-functional between sectors and industries. We currently live in a paradigm where inter-business communication and inter-business collaboration, depending on the context, could actually be illegal. It's discouraged. Like companies can't collaborate because that is perceived in some cases as collusion. So I think with the evolution and the introduction of an REA model, like companies can find some distinctions between them, and maybe they can leverage their own strengths, ideally in service to the customer of that sector, of that industry, and not for collusive purposes for the value of the shareholders. So this is kind of the next dimension of organizational structures. And in the center here, I kind of show the current state with the 3 circles where that would be the 3 dimensions of the REA. But it moves us out of this growth at all costs paradigm that is really championed by the traditional structure into a more integrative dynamic where I think decisions are less polarizing, less binary, and into more relational and obviously more complex. But I think the complexity is mostly to benefit in this case. So that's where I'm going to leave today's talk. There's a bit of kind of exploration that we can do. I've created a tool that actually allows you to develop an REA framework around an idea. So I think we'll actually spend the next 20 minutes kind of in interactive play mode. I'll share my screen, and for those of you that wanna play in an existing space, we can jump into the platform where we can build an REA model, which is called Dunedyne, dunedyne.org. But I'll pause here before we do that and see if there are any questions as we come into the end of the presentation. I'll stop sharing for a moment. Any questions, insights, reflections on what we talked about today?
I raised my hand. I don't know if somebody else wants to.
Oh, sorry, I missed the hand raise. Yeah, Tiberius, go ahead.
Hi. I just want to make some clarifications about some of the deep meanings of REA and where it can really be disruptive.
Sure.
Just for the context here, I think we are one of the first users of the REA model, and we worked with Bill for many years. We worked with some of his close associates, and we did an implementation of REA, but in a different context of network type organizations. And what we understood from that, so I'm one of the co-founders of Sensoric. I don't know how many people are familiar with that. I think the disruption of the REA model comes from the fact that it is able to provide what Bill McCarthy calls the helicopter view of flows. And what I mean by that is that any accounting system that we have from the past see the world or the economy from within out, from the perspective of a firm. Okay, so when you're looking at the economy through accounting methods, you're within a company and looking outside and see flows that go in the company from the supply chain and outside the company from the market. What REA is capable of doing is actually providing a picture of how things flow within the ecosystem without necessarily you as an observer being embedded within an organization. So the paradigm shift here is that this is an accounting system that is an accounting and economic modeling system that is capable of representing a network type economy or a peer-to-peer economy. Okay, that is the disruption. Because if we want to integrate data and how things flow from a whole ecosystem, we would have to go into everybody's database and look at their own inside-out view or accounting, and then mesh that together in order to get that higher level of representation. So we would have to go into all these companies and look at their accounting, and then build the representation of the macroeconomy, how things move. The market can provide some of that information, but we don't have the information within the production unit. Okay, and that's very hard to do. Technically speaking, you would need to, most of the companies work with SAP or different types of ERP systems, and so you would have to first get access to that data, and second, you would have to mesh these technology systems with APIs and build that representation. REA can do that from naturally can do that. So you can build accounting systems for organizations that can become compatible, because now they're using the same sort of protocols, the same language, the same vocabulary, and so they're immediately interoperable. And then you can produce statements using REA ontology that are direct statements about the whole ecosystem. So why is this important? Well, it's important because the peer-to-peer economy is there. That's a reality. So when you look at Bitcoin, for example, you have a network which you can say that it is an asset. It is a physical asset. It's made out of computers that some individuals own. Plug it into the wall for electricity. Install a protocol that is shared across the network, and now you have a network. Okay, so you have an organization, people that own computers called miners, and they're plugged in together to create a network. And at the level of the network, then you have the emergence of this property that is the service that is provided by Bitcoin, right, of token transactions. Now, this asset it doesn't belong to any company, and it's not a private form of property. We call it a non-dominium form of property. So nobody owns it, and nobody can own it. So it's outside of any organizational paradigm, but it becomes a shared asset. And what you have an ecosystem of services that have been built around. So we can understand Bitcoin in the economy associated with it if we just focus on Bitcoin, or if you just focus on a peripheral service around Bitcoin. The only way to understand this economy and to be able to talk about it is to use REA. Okay, so you see, we have an asset, which is Bitcoin network, that is not owned by anybody. Nobody can own it. So that's a different animal already. And it has a permissionless access for other type of services and economic structures or agents to plug into it. It's totally permissionless, right? So this is a shared asset that nobody can own, and then can span an economic ecosystem around it, because everybody can plug into that and build all sorts of things around it. And the only way to understand these flows, it's through REA. Okay, any method of accounting will not work. And so from there we jump to I would like so that's a realization. It allows a different type of economy.
Can I kind of just restate kind of the insights that I'm hearing you share? So I'm hearing you speak to kind of this need of maybe a common standard around how we integrate REA. I think you spoke to the privileged nature of this kind of level of data within an organization. I would agree. I think one of the failures of maybe the adoption of distributed ledgers, blockchain within an organization is because those financial statements, while they're being prepared, are actually privileged, sensitive, restricted information. So I think that what I'm hearing you speak to is like this ecosystemic view. If companies want to adopt REA, this is like a common language or culture or protocol that could be leveraged between organizations. You mentioned SAP. SAP is a company, is an enterprise resource planning platform, ERP. But I think I agree with you, and I what I would love to see is this emergence of a common standard, ideally held kind of as open source logic, open source software, that better enables organizations to communicate and inform one another through the REA kind of language or protocol, and then finally kind of at the economic organizing perspective, I think this creates a better opportunity for organizations to organize around what I would call the kind of the pillars of the economy, the goods, the services, the platforms that we require as just like living human beings, that are currently within the kind of unidimensional paradigm. There's a lot of moat building around it. It's a lot of fierce competition and competition that's not happening in good faith. So I think the economy can benefit through the adoption of REA because it moves us from this kind of contentious, predatory paradigm to a more cooperative, symbiotic paradigm through the knowledge sharing that's happening between the language and the protocol of REA. So I'll finish and pass it to Michael because he has his hand up as well. But
okay.
My what I'm really excited about with REA is platforms like Holochain with their HREA implementation. HREA.io is where that is located, and you can learn more about that. But that integrates this value flows framework for how we can represent value creation and value flow through the REA language between organizations, whether they're formal or informal, in the context of the greater economy. So,
yeah,
Michael,
but just to add this little thing here, it's because you're talking about the economy. The question is which economy, and you're talking about organizations. Actually, REA and blockchain and Holochain and whole REA and everything else that is built on top of REA with peer-to-peer technology just announces the death of traditional organizations. So the same way that blockchain doesn't have any value inside an organization, it is a technology that allows parties that don't trust each other to interface and collaborate. The value of blockchain is in between organizations. The value of REA is not within the organization, is in between organizations. Yep. So you have two technologies that their value is in between organizations. And you can take the logic to the extreme and say, if blockchain and REA allows peers, agents, to collaborate, and you say, well, these peers could be organizations, but I'd say, you know what, why would you create an organization? Bitcoin is not, like a sort of a hard shell organization. So we can envision, that's the disruption here. We can envision an economy where traditional organizations that are units of innovation and production may disappear almost entirely. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like the way the way society and the economy is organized as eggs in a basket. Okay, the shell around the eggs disappears because these technologies pulls the guts out of these cocoons, and what you have is a network of networks that are all interpenetrable. So essentially, you end up with an omelet. That's the disruption here. Is that the economy is not going to be a basket of eggs. It's going to look more like an omelet, and blockchain and REA are the key drivers of this sort of transformation. Anyway,
I agree. I think there's a fundamental change that's gonna occur, and I would say the paradigm of the unidimensional financial statements as like the state machine of an organization that is currently dominated by shareholder corporations. And as we move to REA, I think REA is going to benefit more symbiotic organizations like cooperatives, trust companies, nonprofits, and benefit organizations who are.
You didn't say networks yet.
I didn't say networks. I like to stay at how we're organizing ourselves, kind of from this legal.
Yes.
Michael, go ahead, please.
Hello, thank you. I must confess that I came in a little bit of the idiot in the room, but enjoyed hearing your explanation and wanting to have this be successful. One of the areas where I pay attention is in why has not something been adopted, and what would be changing if this thing is now about 25 years old. There are systemic things that have been getting in the way of its adoption. What might have been a little easier for me to grasp the possibility was to see an expression of the additional levels of visibility in some particular case study. And so that's the question. If, for example, you were trying to say, we would like to show the activity that is taking place in a watershed, and for the actors in that watershed, what would you be able to see that is presently, and I kind of got it conceptually, but it didn't land the way that seeing the difference would so you say, imagine the moon, was so it's feedback that I'm hoping this will work, but I was kind of grappling. And last remark is that sometimes adoption is driven by, I find investors can demand a certain level of visibility, and that if they see the need for this, then they can demand that people who receive their money behave accordingly. So just wanted any thoughts, reactions, anything I said is great. Cheers, and thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. And I think had I had a little bit more time on the presentation, I would have integrated the framework that explores what Gregory Landua and his collaborator, I'm drawing a blank on his name, is the 8 forms of capital. So we could look at what I would call the 8 forms of value, or the 8 forms of wealth, could be understood through the dimensions of resources, events, and agents. So natural value, natural wealth. What are the agents? What are the resources? What are the events of natural wealth in that cycle? And that could be then abstracted to the 7 other forms of value or wealth. So yeah, that would have been the more in-depth, high fidelity exploration. But if you're curious, we could you get in there. But I can't pronounce your name. Exient.
That works. Yeah, I just had a quick clarifying question. When it comes to these sort of the description of peer-to-peer protocolized resources as non-dominium, I was curious if there's a like a more like a full-fleshed technical description within this framework of those sort of resources that are necessarily held in common. Yeah, great question. One of my nerdy kind of like hyper-focused rabbit holes is the commons from a legal perspective. So I'm very inspired by the Charter of the Forest, which is the lesser known twin of the Magna Carta, which was a royal pronouncement that guaranteed the access of the common people to the commons, specifically the forests, which designated and named specific resources that they had access to, like grazing their sheep. So when I look at what is possible and what is known throughout history, and also like through the lens of legal precedent, I see what I would aspire to is see us kind of take this frame of the commons and apply it to the web, the internet as we know it, recognizing that maybe we step beyond just like freedom of speech as like a right, but like participation and collective voice as like a responsibility. I think I perceive the web as a form of, it's not a wonder of the world in and of itself. Maybe I would put that title on like Wikipedia, but it is an ecosystem that we've created. It's a social
ecosystem. It's of our own creation, of our own knowledge. But I think we can apply these legal understandings to this creation, and I would love to see a charter of the web or something that kind of refreshes the charter of the forest, that applies this commons principle to the internet.
What is that? Is the charter of the forest from? Is this from England?
Yes, sorry, yeah, United Kingdom, 13th, 14th century, I think the Magna Carta was.
Yeah, right. So, anyways, an interesting side note is that I've looked a lot, or I'm also like really interested in the enclosure movement and all that. But it gets kind of confusing around the English Civil War, because you see that actually the commons were associated with basically the royalists, because the commons were provided at the leisure of the king, and the parliamentarists that were more like capitalists were the ones who were trying to upend and eclipse the commons. So there's a weird kind of thing where like the radicals were like the monarchists at the time. The radical communists were the monarchists. It's weird, but
yeah. I think it's not a solution, and there exists the whole context of like divine right of kings and like the royals. Yeah, but I think it's something we can learn from. I would love to see maybe integration of like indigenous knowledge and indigenous ways of understanding to apply to kind of the social space that is the web and the internet. So I would like to move into the last final interactive piece, and to do so, I'm just going to share my screen again. But like I mentioned, this interactive piece, I built a tool called Dunedyne. Dunedyne is a platform, I call it a collective intelligence platform for creating a DUNA, a decentralized unincorporated nonprofit association, which is a DAO-like framework that became active law in the state of Wyoming on July 1st. So I'm going to share my screen and show you how it works. It'll take about another 90 seconds. But I'm going to show you the mechanism for defining and creating an REA framework associated with an idea. So let me know if you can see my screen. So if you go to dunedyne.org, this is what you'll see. It'll prompt you to register, and once you register, within about 5 minutes, you should get some credits or tokens to allow you to play with the system. But we're gonna seed a DUNA, and to seed a DUNA, you need at least 35 tokens. But I'm gonna build on this conversation that we've had and introduce an idea called the Digital Forest Collective. So the way Dunedyne works is you take a prompt, an idea for a DUNA in 512 characters or less, and then you can submit that. And it will use collective intelligence, what I like to call AI, in the background to create a structure for a decentralized nonprofit, essentially. So I'm going to submit this, and then I'll read this text while it generates. But my idea that I submitted today was the Digital Forest Collective. So a Digital Forest Collective could apply the principles of the Charter of the Forest to the web, treating digital spaces as commons, using resources, events, and agents, that REA accounting model. It could track resource usage, contributions, and interactions within the digital ecosystem. This approach could promote equitable access, sustainable practices, and collective stewardship of online resources, fostering a more democratic and resilient internet. So it should process that. And once that's done, we'll have a REA framework and kind of this structure of a DUNA. It typically doesn't take this long, so I'm going to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the automation. There it is. Okay, it completed. It was just, I had to be a little bit patient today. So once you submit your idea into Dunedyne, what you'll receive on the output is this. You'll have a mission statement that it creates for you. It will classify you as a nonprofit within a category. It also identifies as a nonprofit, your alignment, the alignment of your idea with the national taxonomy of exempt entities, which is a taxonomy that has been developed within the United States, aligned with the Internal Revenue Service, that demonstrates and speaks to the benefit of that nonprofit in a categorical frame. So this has been identified as classes S and W. S is the community improvement and capacity building. W is public and social benefit. Dunedyne also creates a purpose statement. It repeats your seed text. It creates a portfolio of initial projects that you could start to explore within your Duna. And then finally, it creates your REA model, which applies the REA accounting methodology to your Duna concept and shows how you might be able to organize your nonprofit within the 3 dimensions of nonprofit management, which is your programs, the reason that nonprofit has been formed. So in this case, that is the community building and social benefit. Fundraising, how does that nonprofit raise funds? It names how you could do that, and the REA associated with that activity. And then finally, administration, how is that nonprofit administered? So it identifies REA within that as well. So this is a bit of a play space. I welcome you to join. You get free credit just by joining, and you get the ability to create one Duna using that credit. So let me know if you have any questions, and I think we'll just release it from here. Thank you all for participating. Thanks for going about 5 minutes longer. It took a little while for people to show up, but I'm glad we had a good turnout. So I appreciate you all, and wish you a great day and a good rest of your week. Thanks for listening today. Thanks, Josh, Tiberius, Elizabeth, Iowan, Rather Mercurial, Josh, Hunter, and Excellent, and Michael. Great attendance today.
Thank you, Todd. Did you put a link of the Dunedyne in the chat?
I did not, but it's just dunedyne.org, and I will put that in right now.
Thank you.
DUNADYNE.org. And that's a tool that I built through a cooperative that I co-founded. So if anybody here is interested in kind of building financial technology through a co-op structure and with an emphasis on co-ownership, reach out to me. You can reach me at todd.y@ieee.org or my organizational email at todd.y@roots.coop.
Todd, I will add that the root word for commons, community, commerce, all that is the oldest written word in the human written language.
I like that. Can you say more? Do you want to say more?
It means to. The root word came in Mesopotamia, and it means to bind. So it really was the sort of clay tablet contract binding us together for mutual advantage.
Yeah, I like that. Corporation, I think, is another start with
exactly. Yeah,
commons and corporation, I think in today's day and age, kind of find themselves on different ends of the spectrum, where one is focused on.
And you mentioned the sort of time and the destruction of the commons, and that's also when commons became base, meaning lower class, as opposed to nobility becoming sort of the more refined human nature. Yeah.
I really appreciate that. I like to take this more kind of expansive, maybe romanticized view of the commons as something like we all share. And my last kind of presentation along these lines looked at what I would consider as the wealth of the commons, which kind of took this eight forms of value, 8 forms of capital framework, kind of through a long arc of time, and each form of value is expressed, I would say, in a type of commons. So I really appreciate this idea of the commons within, and I think hopefully a centering force of the economy. Again, taking this romanticized frame of the economy as this shared house. It's a collective house, and the practice of economics is this management of this house, whether that's at a local level, a neighborhood, but also at a global level, a planetary level, because a lot of we're not properly managing that economy, that house, in balance, I would say, with our living planet, and that's one of the challenges that we're facing as an economy, a globalized economy.
I put a link in a chat of a collaborative document called the Whole System Stewardship Design Principles for Managing a Common, which is based on Elinor Ostrom's work.
Yeah.
And kind of really breaking that down. It came from a sort of, I think it was a graduate thesis from, I think it was Dartmouth.
And
so
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I'm exploring actively is a collaboration with a group called the Holistic Systems Cooperative, and they're kind of taking this frame that you just spoke to, this holistic systems framework, and understanding how we can build mechanisms to signal offers and needs around those forms of value. So if kind of moving out the unidimensional, I need money. That's no longer the question. It's I need childcare support. That's denominated in time. I could buy that, or it could be something that is facilitated within my community, within my neighborhood. But I'm really interested in these mechanisms of how do we maybe outside of REA, how do we organize ourselves as humanity across all different kind of geographic spectrums to fulfill our own needs, to fulfill our own offers, and build on kind of the gifts that we offer to one another in what I would say the commons.
Right. And that's especially important to look at for the global south that does not have access to a lot of fiat, right?
Yeah. I would say that a lot of informal forms of organizing are actually much more vital as practice. And I would say, as using the language of global north and global south, I would say we actually have a lot more to learn from these informal forms of organizing as the global north. I would be wary of asserting certain Western patterns that I think are not necessarily helpful to ourselves on the global south.
Right.
And
a lot of that relates surviving with those mechanisms.
They are. And in some cases thriving. I would say the global wealth has a glut of financial capital, of financial value, but we lack in other ways the other kind of complementary forms of value that we commodify often to create financial value. I see, Michael, your hand up. Would you like to jump in here?
Yeah, sure. I was wondering if, as a prototype, if it was a non-financial organization, in other words, that might not even have more than 2 nickels to rub together, but is in fact producing value in different ways. So whether it's a sangha, might have some operational costs, but what it's tracking or trying to track are impacts of a different kind, may not be denominated in those 8 forms of capital. But I was wondering, are those kind of experiments ones that you're interested in, or you're really trying to find quantitatively metric-based type traceability?
Yeah, I would say no. I think there is some level of traceability if they want them to be traceable, whether quantitative or qualitative. I think depends on the measure indicator. So one of the communities that I'm participating in is a group called Vivero, and Vivero is this network of I would say bioregional stewardship. It's a community that's really focused on caring for the planet. And one of the partners that I've been in conversation with for almost 2 years, the way they organize locally in Costa Rica is called Manos Cambiadas, which is like a way of sharing time. It has no kind of it's not really measured. It's just I think it's an act of and a practice of care for your neighbors. They help each other with agricultural tasks. And that comes around. I would say it's a more of an example of mutual aid or informal forms of organizing. But I'm really compelled by that, and I'm really interested in exploring specifically these patterns of as it relates to kind of financial value and our kind of frame of economics that's present now is how can we give together, sharing our resources? How can we save together and acquire assets, homes? I'm really interested in co-ops and community land trusts. And then how do we invest together, where that's less assets and more kind of equities and representative of our participation in the organization forms of organizing. So giving together, saving together, and investing together, what role do trusts play, or directed trusts, in potentially facilitating these different forms of exchange to move us from what I would hope is kind of this less extractive, dominant nature of the economy now under shareholder corporations, and into a more participatory or collaborative form of organizing that balances these with each other. Where I think our economy, the root of our economy, is based on the benevolence of our planet and her ability to actually provide for us. So I think there's some responsibility for us to regenerate our planet and care for our planet, and recognize the gifts that are inherent. The gift is the foundation of our economy. We extract from that gift and call it commerce, but I think we fail to recognize that as a commons and
well, we haven't built reciprocity.
We haven't built reciprocity, a circular economy, if you will. Yeah, there's not really cycles,
right?
With the earth itself,
right?
Yeah.
So, Todd, what's a good next step in terms of staying connected with what you're doing and learning more, sharing more?
I'm on Telegram, I'm on WhatsApp, LinkedIn, Twitter. I can be found 3 times a week on Vivero. We have what we call circle calls. I'm the steward of the technology circle and a participant in the governance circle and the partnership circle. And then I am a founding member of Roots Cooperative, which is a consultancy. So I like working with small businesses and entrepreneurs and creatives. I think my skill is in systems design and prototyping. So I work with teams that are wanting to bring a digital product to life. So I do the design and prototyping to get to what's called proof of concept. So, yeah.
Would you be willing to put your email in the chat?
Yeah, I have 2 emails. If you want to reach me on more kind of like topical, you can reach me at todd.y@IEEE.org, or I can be business or collaboration. I would say please reach out to me at todd.y@roots.coop is my kind of collaborative email. Yeah. So
awesome. It's been a wonderful.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, because it's really sort of at the heart of the work I'm doing, which is organizing regenerative culture via watersheds.
I like that.
That's how nature organizes, right? And really looking at how we can find alternate economies to allow, especially people in underserved communities, to create abundance and thrivability, even if they're starved from economic opportunity for whatever reason.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm really interested in becoming more of a participator, I guess, in the bioregional financing facility discussion and the BioFi community of practice on Hilo. So I'm really interested in bioregionalism, thinking about less about national boundaries and watershed boundaries what role does water play in our economy? It's a vital asset. It's everything. I am over 75% water.
And
if we don't take care of our water
molecules, our water molecules. Yeah.
I like thinking of the economy in cycles. So we have like the soil cycle, the water cycle, climate cycles. And I mean, if you talk to a traditional academic economist, those are not related. It's all about economic agents and whatever. But I try and take a expansive view of the economy as this, again, shared house and the stewardship of our house, whether it's an actual house or the landscape in which that house exists.
Well, without liquid water, we would resemble Mars, right?
Yep. And hopefully that's not the trajectory. So
Yeah,
I'm very optimistic. I like to speak to what's possible.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Yeah, appreciate you being
Thank
here.
you. Yeah, likewise. Appreciate it.
I guess
Any
one
other-
more question. Yes, I have one. First,
I'll
I'd
go
like
to the half
clap up-
hour.
I'd like to clap up Elizabeth. She is on the World Water Unity Network, I think it is, the coordinating goddess. So that's quite a, showing up here for you. If you care about that, you're definitely have the
Me too.
attention of the right person. Second is I'm trying to figure out what would be a best next step to engage, and I kind of alluded to there are certain community level prototypes, and whether that's helping a sangha or a congregation measure not its operating of the sangha, but how is it impacting. But the other that came to mind was IEEE is making some global standards, right? And in certain classes of project design, if some of this becomes an available resource as part of a default approach to tracking planet positive, the initiative is planet positive initiatives, that could be very powerful, but it's a much bigger dinosaur. I don't know if you've been trying to do that or not, but if you're interested in getting IEEE to kind of incorporate some of this as a standard, this might be a good time to act, and we can talk about that more, but I'll just leave that. Or much more addressable immediately is something community, so which of those two seems more?
Yeah, although I do kind of align myself with IEEE, I'm really interested in, and I'm having active kind of discussions in and around like NIST around the well-being economy. So like what maybe at a national level, what frameworks or ideas can we propose that recenters well-being apart from like GDP and economic growth,
right?
In the context of urban or rural environments, and so like that's a discussion I'm participating in. But related to collaboration, like I would be interested in helping support documentation and narratives around this shift that I see being possible. I'm also interested in contributing to frameworks or protocols. I am a data engineer, so I do some technical documentation and some coding, less so recently. But yeah, I will say, I mentioned this at the beginning, I'm going to be a dad in the next 90 days. I have my first child on the way. So I am looking for paid work, and thinking about my household.
The IEEE then is probably the better long-term investment. But I pinged you through LinkedIn, and we can follow up at a different time. But I too have been a hacktivist, by the way, and one of the ways in which what you're doing provides visibility into well-being is that well-being is better predicted by social and environmental factors than by personal traits. Or even financials. And so this idea of showing certain kind of dynamics or flows, as you were calling them, is a way of seeing the system that is currently not, that is important to well-being. So I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but I can cite the cases that kind of roll up.
For me, the way I frame that is how do we create and produce the conditions of an economy that creates security. So with the understanding that like economic security and like environmental conditions play a role on like the development of the individual, how do we create those conditions where economic and personal security is like a felt thing? I think that's the root of like getting to well-being and health is reframing the whole discussion around GDP and money as like the growth, and moving toward more human and environmental measures of the economic conditions that allow us and the Earth to thrive.
So I promise I'm now dropping off. It'll be the last thing I say, but
We have 8 more minutes, so it's all good.
a different prototyping exercise that some of us are involved in is prototyping a better visibility for the impact investor. And we have a point of view about some of this, and it could be something that we hope will be self-monetizing in a sense. So we're connected. Let's just talk further. And again, it's alpha, not beta, but yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Michael. And
Good.
Elizabeth, love this. Relationship is the currency of every living system. I love that framing and thought. Thanks for sharing that insight.
And currency is the current of the currency is when it's in motion, right?
Right. Yeah, if you spend enough time with the holochain folks, you'll hear about metacurrency, and they talk about the metacurrency project is the current and flow of what we see. So like they reframe it currency to currency, and you can see different value flows.
Mm-hmm. I vibed with Matthew Schutte for a little bit.
Yeah, Matthew Schutte, Fernando Ibarra, Art Brock, great folks.
Yeah, I would love to dive more into that. So I'm also interested in the BioFi.
Yeah.
community.
I would love to see BioFi and holochain become symbiotic.
Yeah. I think they're close.
I think so too.
Yeah.
All right, Elizabeth, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah. I'll be on for another 6 minutes if anybody else wants to ask questions or share insights. Or maybe I'll just wrap up early, but thank you all for joining.
Briefly, I was wondering about this issue in Portland, specifically about embodied carbon buildings coming up that aren't right, that aren't accounting for all the cost or all the carbon footprint of constructing a new building.
Yeah.
That will take better to in the same case with cars in many cases. I wonder about REA applied to something like that and true cost accounting at large.
Yeah. I mean, I could go on a little bit. So one of my clients is a housing cooperative in the Baltimore area. It is a worker-owned housing cooperative, and we restore board-up homes into livable apartments. And so one of the things we're thinking about is our materials. How do we completely reframe a home using new lumber, or do we try and keep the lumber from the trash out? These homes have, some cases, 100-year-old pine. So I think with an REA accounting model, we could look at, does that resource need to come from the living world in a forest, or could we reuse lumber to create a habitable structure? I think that's a kind of one of these relational decisions that could be made with more informed kind of awareness of materials cost. Like, and again, when I say cost, it's not single dimension of value. It's the cost of, there are ecological costs, the social costs, the time costs. So I think REA moves us into this space where we can have more thoughtful conversation around materials, built capital, if you will, and less abstract, how we house ourselves, how we create infrastructure to support our livelihoods, roads, buildings, all of that.
So this would mean having accounting for specific externalities, for example, like carbon production.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So in the context of ecology, ecosystem services, like I don't necessarily like that framing, but I think it's one of many perspectives that we could apply in the REA model. Cost to future capacity generation. I think as a living planet, the world is generative. So when we talk about regeneration, we're just restoring that capacity for our living planet to be regenerative. And that would be related to thinking about ecological costs.
But we can do that with the current systems. I mean, you can think about materials and stuff.
But it's framed as negative externalities, and it's something that's like not.
Well, that's
accounting.
that's not a feature of SAP. Let's say that's not a feature. But the ontology itself, what REA does is that the vocabulary that it uses allows for a resource-centric and an agent-centric ledger of an economy. So essentially, when you do just accounting, and focus on the balance sheets and financials and stuff like that, at the level of the company, there's a lot of things that you're missing for putting it in there. But the REA model, what it does, it atomizes processes in an organization and in between organizations or in the network. So when you use an REA model let's say you use it inside the organization, which I think it's not exploiting its full potential. But let's say you try to use REA, implement REA within an organization. Then what happens is that you're going to tie together agents, which are individual employees. They are part of the system as they use resources in what we call events. So you end up with a ledger of economic activity that ties every agent with every resources into events together. So you have resources, agents, processes, outputs that are also resources. And that's how you build the ledger. So what happens here is that once you have all these relationships between users and resources, you can have this user-centric and resource-centric economy, because you have all the information. And you can move to non-monetary systems because from that ledger, from all these relationships between users and resources, you can infer many things. It's like what kind of participation that particular individual in that particular organizational context, or maybe in the network, what that particular individual has brought in as valuables, and could be tangibles or intangibles. But you have that data, it's in the ledger. So it's not just about money. You have the relationships, and from these relationships, you can infer anything you want, and move towards incentive systems that are non-monetary. Move into what Werner Ali calls value networks, which is the transit of intangibles between organizations. So you can track all that stuff. So REA is key positions, because at the very level of the ontology, resources and agents become primitives, and the relationships between them, that they're always tracked.
The way, I guess the last thing I'll say is, I think REA could be the elements that allow us to coordinate our economy, and I think we do that through thoughtful composition. It creates the possibility for sense making and some level of collective control of our economic structures and the forms of organizing. And I think without it, it's a blind dark forest. Where data is proprietary, and we don't really ever know the real state of our organizations, even public companies. So thanks for participating, Tiberius. I appreciate your questions.
Have a good one. Thank you.
Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks guys.
everyone.
That was awesome.
Bye, everybody.
Yeah.